My name is Dana Cavalea, author of Habits of a Champion and former Director of Strength and Conditioning and Performance for the New York Yankees. On today's show, I want to share with you what Derek Jeter told me to do when we were winning, and it's the complete opposite of what you would think. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives under the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Well, let me ask you this. As a leader, do you consider yourself as a champion? If so, have you formulated a plan, a strategy to improve your sleep, reduce your pain, lower your stress, improve your body composition in order to remain a champion? If you haven't, stay tuned because you're about to find out how to play the leadership game like a champ. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes by looking for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast on our Facebook page. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over to wherever you tune into podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Philadelphia to Florida, all the way to Washington, D.C., and even Colorado. You can also catch us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, regular viewer, thank you for tuning in because you have made us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. With a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show, we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Spotify, Google Home, and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you are a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that leadership is a champion's game. You're not just got to get to the top, but when you get there, you've got to find a way to stay there. So have you considered your body in the equation? Well, what if you had somebody guiding you who could actually bring the same techniques and strategies and culture and attitude and service and first-class training and development that you would get if you were dealing with pro athletes? Well, let's find out together. My guest on this episode is Dana Cavalea. He spent 12 years with some small group. What were they called now? Let me think of it. Oh, yeah, the New York Yankee Organization. Many of the years, he was the Director of Strength and Conditioning and Performance Enhancement, winning a World Series in 2009. In addition, he has been the recipient of the 2009 MLB Nolan Ryan Award. This is an award that is given to the MLB's top strength coaches voted by peers. During his career, Dana has had the opportunity to train baseball greats such as Alec Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, Marino Rivera, Andy Petit, and so many more. Dana has formulated plans and strategies to improve sleep, reduce pain, lower stress, improve the body composition, speed, and strength of power. Currently, he is a high-performance speaker, consultant to pro athletes, entrepreneurs, business executives, workforces, universities on lifestyle strategy and performance enhancement. Please put your hands together and help me welcome former Director of Performance of the New York Yankees, author of Habits of a Champion. Nobody becomes a champion by accident. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Coach Dana Cavalea. Welcome, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you going through that intro there.
Was that, would it have needed more Derek Jeter in there, or was that enough for you?
That was enough. Sometimes I say I should just maybe condense it to like director for the Yankees. Boom, let's go.
Okay. So before we start, Dana, one of the questions I love to ask my guests, because, you know, you've worked around these superstars. You've had them around you for many years. But oftentimes the people who have the greatest impact and influence on us are people that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily know or wouldn't necessarily think of as somebody who's had a massive influence on you. Who is somebody that we likely wouldn't know or maybe wouldn't suspect who's had a major influence on your life?
You know, it's funny you ask that. For me, I always go back to my parents, right? And I actually look at them as one. You know, is it my mom? Is it my dad? But obviously, I'm a combination of both. And you know, with that, I learned great lessons from both of them. My mom is a real New York City, Queens, go get her, go after it, go, go, go. And my dad's a musician who's much more, you know, strategized and much more detail oriented. So you get the combination, you get the guts from my mother, and you get the analytical side and the detailed nature from my father. So it's a good mix.
Is that something that, you know, was that always there as a kid?
Always. My mother, you know, I remember as a kid, I'd be like, Mom, can you make that phone call for me? Oh, no. Here's the phone. You make the call. You know, it was always that. And my father was always one that made sure we did what we said we were going to do. And you had to be a person of your word. And that was it, because there's nothing more important in life than doing what you say you're going to do. That's your character. That's who you are.
Right. That for me is very interesting because as I said, the title of your book is Habits of a Champion, but the subtitle is Nobody becomes a champion by accident. Talk to us about that subtitle.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I realized is, like, listen, there's people that are born with talent. We all have different levels of talent. We're all talented in different things. But we all have to work, and we all get to different levels by putting certain efforts forward. I mean, listen, there's a ton of podcasts out there, but how have you gotten to the top, right? It's the effort, it's the actions, it's the thinking. How do I elevate? And then you put the step, you know, you take the action and you start moving the chains and you start moving down that line. So it's not an accident. When you see someone at the top, they've done things that maybe you didn't see on camera or on Instagram, but they're working, and they're working oftentimes when you're not looking.
So, I mean, in a simple one-liner, is that it? Is that the key to being a champion? Is doing what it takes when no one's looking?
Well, they say that, you know, that's something that can be said. But I always say this, you know, their talent is also very underrated. But talent is so real. And for me, I've been fortunate to work with some greats in business and most of the time in sports. And talent was a very, very real thing. But when you had talent that didn't work, that talent shot up and it crashed down. When you have talent that worked, you saw guys that had 20-year careers in a game where a long career is 5 years. Right. You know, so it was really cool to see that up front and personal.
So let's go into that for a minute, and because of the context of here is, of course, leadership. But you know, you just talked about something that I think is really important, because we see this in leadership. We see this in, quote, success, where somebody shoots to the top. They are the, quote unquote, overnight success. And I think there's two versions of that. And there's the version of that is the overnight success that took 20 years. And then there's the overnight success that is a shooting star, which is what you were just talking about. Let's talk about those in the context of, because one of the things you talk about is that what most champion performers do differently than let's say these shooting stars, what is it that real champion performers do differently than the shooting stars?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know I talked about work earlier and putting in the work, but one thing I noticed, I was raised as a young athlete. I was taught, listen, be the first one there and the last one to leave. So I was the first one there and the last one to leave. But I wasn't always sure of what I was doing while I was in between those lines. So I was doing a lot of just random things. And what I saw from players like Derek Jeter was they were oftentimes the last ones there and the first ones to leave. And right there, I said, that doesn't make much sense to me.
No.
When I watched them work, that was the differentiator right there. They had a very clear, individualized plan that they were executing with focus, and they were very timely with it. They were very efficient. So when they got to the ballpark to work, it was boom, arrived at the same time every day, and they got to work. And you could tell, hey, at 2:30, you knew where this player was going to be. 3 o'clock, you knew where they were going to be. So they were just polishing their routine and making it as tight as possible. And over time, I found that was a big differentiator between players that just came up for what we call in the game a cup of coffee, and the player that stayed for a long time. That player that stayed, they had a method, and they executed upon that method and plan each and every day. They weren't looking here and saying, well, that sounds good. I read that in that magazine. Let me do that today. Or I saw that on YouTube. Let me do that. They just knew what was right for them, and they trusted it. They believed in it, and they didn't try to get too fancy.
Well, in the book, you talk about respecting and valuing your own time. Is that the context here exactly what they're doing? That
Exactly.
they understood the value of their time?
100%. Everything was so planned. But you know what else they did? They planned their rest. They planned time to unplug. And I know I spent a lot of my time, in my younger years especially, running, chasing greatness, right? But what I saw was these guys weren't necessarily chasing it. They were attracting it. They went to work. They executed each and every day. And it was almost coming to them at a very comfortable pace. And they never got overwhelmed. And I thought that was really cool. And that line that you said, about time, that was a Derek Jeter line. He said, if they don't respect your time, they don't respect you. And that's how much he respected time. Because,
right.
It's all we have. And we only have so much of it.
So these champions, they worked hard, but they had a very high level of respect for their own time. So I'm interested to know this. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but did you find they respected your time?
I found the majority of them respected my time. And actually that line that Derek Jeter gave me was when I was disrespected in terms of my time, and I didn't even know it. So we were in Boston playing the Red Sox, and I had a player tell me the night before, hey, I want to meet you to train at 9 o'clock. And I said, well, you got to be there at 9 because I got Derek Jeter at 10. So here it is, 9:45, Derek Jeter comes down early to get ready for his session. And he says, hey, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm waiting for so-and-so who never showed. And that's when he told me, he said, listen, if somebody doesn't respect your time, they don't respect you. But what I also found too, oftentimes, if they don't respect me, they also don't respect themselves at a root level. So
that for me is fascinating. I have a very good friend who is a champion. It's somebody who I've worked with for years, who is a champion at what they do. This person has won high-level competitions and done all kinds of stuff. And I was interviewing him on a podcast many years ago. And, and he said, Dove is the most generous and kind person. And he's always there for me. And, he's saying this without me prompting him. And he said, he goes, but you got to know, he's a time Nazi.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, really? I'm a time Nazi? And he said, oh yeah. He goes, if I am not on time, you will give me shit. Right?
Yeah.
Well, of course, because you're disrespecting not only my time, but your own. Right. And if you're not, as the Marines say, if you're on time, you're late.
Yeah.
Right. it's a very interesting thing to talk about in the context of champions, because again, we have this, and I think we see this more than ever in the workforce today, even particularly at the entrepreneurial level. Everybody's busy, but are we productive? And that's a respecting of the time.
Oh, well, it's interesting.
Something we're all challenged with.
Yeah, and what it's interesting because I do work with some executives too that are basically fried out and burnt out.
Yeah.
And what I find is that they're just working. They're putting time in, but the question is, hey, what are you doing during that time? And so many people, even at the highest level, they feel like they have to just be there because they have to set the standard of being there. But the real question is, what are we doing when we're there? And in sports, what's great is when you get to a pro stadium and you're a part of a professional sports team, right when you get there, the first thing you do is you check there's basically a daily itinerary. It doesn't change very much day to day, but it says, hey, the national anthem is at this time. Stretch is at this time. So you're building your whole day around these landmarks of time and these events that you have to participate in because you'll be fined if you don't. And it's really cool that it keeps even the most disorganized person and group of people completely organized just by putting in these landmarks. And I think that's why in business too, people love meetings because it gives them some kind of a flag
to nail down.
Structure. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
now, like I said, you were the strength and conditioning coach for the New York Yankees. And I think that in leadership, in business leadership, oftentimes we tend to lose connection with the body. It becomes very much about the head. It becomes about the things the head can do and the results, the bottom line that we can achieve via our coconut.
Right.
Talk to us about, how focusing on one's physicality can actually improve the results in life, in business, and in leadership.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a gentleman that I've worked with for years. When I first started working with him, he started a private aviation company and a couple other, alcohol brands. And he told me, he says, listen, sometimes you have to sacrifice the body. And I said, no, you don't. I said, that's the last thing you should sacrifice, because if you do, everything else will be compromised. He actually went on to have a cardiovascular episode, and that sort of refocused him because
tweaked his mind a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It rocked him. And that was when he said, okay, I need to make it different. I need to make a change. So when we get this sort of news, what do? The first thing we do is we kind of re-enlist ourselves into the process of getting back in shape. But the one thing I always say when I start with this topic is when you do any kind of exercise, whether it's walking, whether it's hiking, whether it's running, weightlifting, you name it, whether you just go to the gym, how do you feel about yourself when you're done? And you typically feel really good about yourself at a roots level, at a core level. And what does it take to be successful in business, sales, anything? It takes confidence. It takes belief in yourself. So I just talk about training, even to professional athletes, as, hey guys, I never want you to doubt yourself. So let's look at your physicality as a way to strengthen your mentality. And then you're in a great position to succeed.
Yes.
And that's the way I look at it. It's like, it's just building your base. It's like stretching before you run. If you don't stretch, you have the potential of getting injured. If you don't train your body for the most competitive sport in the world, which is business, you can get in big trouble. So let's at least put our best self forward. We don't have to be marathon runners or do anything crazy, but let's make our physicality a part of our daily process.
Yeah, as my good friend Alan Stein, who wrote Raise Your Game, he was a basketball coach and, worked with some of the great basketball players. And he's also been a guest on the show, we're grateful for. And one of the things he said, that one of the things that he noticed was that when a team would lose, the coach would come on and say, well, we're going to go back to the basics. And he goes, why do people go back to the basics instead of keeping the basics?
Right.
And it's exactly what you're saying here is like, this is basic. If you don't do what's basic, everything else falls apart. And that just makes so much sense and is often so lost.
Right. And we're all chasing what I say, the commodity that we're all chasing is energy. We all want energy because I say energy wins.
Right.
But how do we, like people say you can't create energy. For the context of this conversation, we're going to talk about how do we create energy within ourselves, right? And
yes,
through training, through sleep, through hydration, and through fueling. Those are the 4 ways. And then we have to recover ourselves, which includes the sleep, but also some other modalities. But that's the only way. So we have to keep ourselves sustainable. We talk so much about sustainable business, but how do we sustain ourselves?
So let's talk about that, because one of the things that you speak about in the book that I think I've spoken about this many times on this show, which is that we live in a world where the new religion, particularly in entrepreneur, the new religion is hustle.
Yeah.
Right. And in the religion of hustle, you can't ever be seen to rest. It's sacrilege to be seen to rest. And you talk about the importance of rest in the success process. You said there's other modalities. We're not just talking about sleep. So talk to us about not just sleep, and we want to talk about that, but also those other modalities, so that people can begin to grasp how important this is. Because I know in my 30s, I went on 4.5 hours of sleep, and 6 hours was a big night's sleep. Yeah. And I realized, when I was older, I realized that was kind of not smart. Yeah.
Well, I think we all go through different phases, obviously, of life and different cycles within our business career. Now, when you're in your 20s, that's when I say you're all guts and nuts, and you just kind of go and you go and you go. And then usually it's when you start to get that first knockdown or that first bit of stress. And even for those that have experienced anxiety that they've never been, that just kind of got a little out of control. That's when you start to hit the brakes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Start to say, you know what? I should probably do something here. Something's not fundamentally right. And that's when, you deploy your shrink, you hire your coaches, you start to figure it all out. Right. And ultimately it comes down to you were really living a life that was completely out of balance. And you knew it. You knew you were going too hard. And, sure. and you had some great successes. You had some little failures. You had a lot of fun along the way. And this is just what you're supposed to do. But the hustle and grind culture will always catch up to you. And I always say, just do yourself a favor when you're at a public airport, if you're not fortunate enough yet to fly on a private plane, and look at the people running through the airport. Those people, you see hiccups in gait, you see people that are bent over, you see bad posture, you see this guy, holding a coffee cake in his hand and a beer in the other. You see people that are fighting for survival, as I like to say, and they're in that painful phase. Mm-hmm. But again, they may have an event at some point that says, hey, let me hit the brakes here, and I got to grab hold of my health, because it's the one thing that will not only bankrupt you and bankrupt your company. But so many of us are powered, and we all know this. It's like, well, why are we running? Why did this hustle 365 culture evolve? And most of it's fear. Yes. And it's something that everyone talks about, but the typical entrepreneur, I work with guys that run hedge funds and private equity that will never, I don't want to say never go out of business, but they have enough money in their bank account to where they'll live fine even if they do go out of business. Right. And they're still afraid of it. And that fear is what has them board a plane, to fly to China only to be back 3 days later.
Yep.
And that is driving that action. And what I found with the great players, and even the greats in business that get it, is they don't operate from a fear position. They don't feel somebody pushing them. They are in charge. They decide what they're going to do. And Mariano Rivera, this is a great story. I put it in the book too. He told me this. As a kid, I used to watch this guy. He was fearless out there on the mound. So I was at his house one day working with him, stretching him. I said, Mo, how do you do it? And he goes, do what? I said, how do you perform in the highest situations and not melt? Mm-hmm. And he says, well, buddy, I do 3 things. He goes, number 1, I slow everything down. Number 2, I quiet the noise. And number 3, I throw 1 pitch at a time. He's basically describing being in the zone. He goes, but I don't let any external variables control me. He says, I'm in full control. And I said, well, what about the big games? The World Series, the game on the line. And this is the line that really changed my life. And he said, buddy, there are no big situations. We decide in life what is a big situation. Every situation is the same. We decide what we give life to. And I said, wow, really powerful when you like step back and you're like, yeah, how many times have I gotten crazy in my life? Or how many times have you gotten crazy over something? And when you could step back from it, you're like, okay.
But that concept is absolutely true. I get it. I agree with it. However, for the average person, that's what it is. It's a concept.
Right.
Grasping that in the context of practicality, you know, when you talked about what he said about slowing everything down and stopping the noise, you know, that's, you know, as somebody watching, listening, this is going to go, I don't have a time machine. I don't know how to slow things down. I don't know, you know, I can't suddenly go deaf and not hear the world, or the screaming inside of my own head.
Right.
Those are concepts. You know, you talk about these strategies. Talk to us about these strategies of taking care of yourself and the practicality of that.
Yeah. So something I do is I realize how connected we all are today. Right. You know, even for me, I get caught up in the notifications. You know, I always try to be very responsive with email. And I said to myself just a couple of weeks ago, I said, you know, why are you always looking to the phone? That's something that's noise. It's something that distracts me. I said, we're going to shut off the notifications. Amazing. It took down the frequency in which I look at my phone, because when I look at my phone, I lose more time than just looking at the email, because then I go check 2 other apps.
Yep.
So that's a strategy in itself for me personally to reduce the noise. But one thing I do with a lot of my executives that I work with is I say, listen, I want you to start your day with what I call your morning walk. It's simple. It's a disconnected 20 to 60 minutes. You decide. And it's a minimum of 3 days a week. And it's just a time for you to create solitude for yourself within yourself. There's no structure to it. You just walk. Come up with the time, walk, and then what I have set up for them is a routine that they go through in the morning to address their muscle tissue, you know, breathing, activating their heart rate, and then boom, they jump into the shower, they eat, and they're gone. But the strategy to actually quiet the noise is to first realize what's causing the noise. And noise, ding, 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 you know? And this has contributed to a lot of noise. So that's number one. And then the other thing that causes noise, I call them tripwires. We all have different tripwires, whether it's chasing relevance and you feel like your relevance is starting to drop.
Yes.
So again, let's say you're running a podcast. It's always been number 1 through 10, and now you're at 15. It's a tripwire. It flips you out. I need more reviews. I need more of this. And you become, because you're a type A high performer who expects greatness out of themselves and everyone else around them, you will respond, you know, as if you're at war for that moment until you pull back up into there. So we have to understand our own tripwires and our own responses. And what I say is sometimes, even if you do fall into the 15th position and you should be number 1 through 10, think about the actions you're going to take, but don't put the emotions into it. Because when you charge yourself up emotionally, that's what creates more noise and more friction and more stress and anxiety within yourself. So I spend a lot of time on the front end trying to understand what is causing your noise. And then it's less of a concept and it's much more of a, oh yeah, that's what's causing it. Now, how do I prevent that? And that's what coaching is. I mean, professional athletes deal with this, the same things that we deal with. It's just they're really good at accepting coaching and actually putting their foot down and saying, you know, from a discipline standpoint, I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know?
Yeah, I mean, something you're touching on there, which I think is we should go into, which is, you know, stress affects the body. And you know, there are, I can't, you know, for most people, they look at a pro athlete, and as you know, as you were saying about being on the mound, you know, the big game, and the brain floods the body with cortisol, which is the stress hormone for those people who don't know. And what happens when your brain is flooded with cortisol, 27% of the blood flow to the frontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that's used for decision making, is cut off. So because it's now gone to the extremities, so you can run and you can fight and you can, so all those things are taking place. But that cortisol has an impact on the body, particularly if it stays in the body. It lowers the immune system. It does all those kinds of things. So talk to us a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about getting that cortisol out of the body, de-stressing the body, which is now carrying the brain's neurochemical cocktail of stress.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's funny. I was working last year with an author, New York Times bestseller. He speaks probably, 70 plus times a year, probably similar to you. And he said, Dana, man, when I speak, sometimes I just feel so overwhelmed. He's like, and then people start asking me questions afterwards and I have to get out of there. And I said, you have such a release when you're up there, hormonal release, that the best thing you can do is get out of there when you're done. And what we did was we came up with a strategy where he literally goes up to his room, he puts the temperature to where it's a little bit chilling in the room, not freezing, and he lays on the floor. That's it. He just lays on the floor. Phone's out of there, and he lays arms spread to the side for 15 to 20 minutes, and then he starts his day over again, where he'll get up, he'll take a shower, he'll freshen up, and he'll become a new person. So it was a strategy to say, you have this huge release when you're up there, Now how do we bring you back? Right. Because naturally, when you peak, you have to come back down.
Yes.
And so many people, they keep their foot on the throttle. And like a lot of speakers I know, just as an example, they'll speak and then they'll run to the airport to try to make a flight. So now they're charged and they're charging again. And then, flying in general has a little bit of an edge to it. That whole deal. So now over time, if you keep doing that, you're just keeping your system elevated and charged up. And I'm using speaking as an example, but let's say you're a business professional and you have a meeting that you have to go to, or you have shareholders you need to report to.
Yes.
All of that is stressful. And it's not just the moment of stress. It's the moments that lead up to it, the planning, the preparation, and it's also the hours and potentially days afterwards that it hangs around. And anyone that's had any level of a stress or anxiety attack, panic attack, it's only because you've been on for too long and elevated for too long.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's scary. And it can happen to anybody. And
I know this personally. I never experienced anything like that. I used to say, you can throw me on a stage at any point in time and I'll never have any nervousness whatsoever. And then several years ago, after a house fire, I started having anxiety attacks. And it was like,
scary.
That level of stuff comes into your body. It's difficult. And it takes a lot of management. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. And those grounding strategies are really important. Now, I want to come to another chapter in your book because it sounds like really embracing that level of anxiety, which is find the bully and knock him out is the subject of the chapter title. So tell us about finding the bully and knocking him out.
Yeah. There's a gentleman I work with in private equities, from Argentina, and he told me when he was a kid he used to move around a lot, and to establish himself in the new school, the first thing he'd do is to say, hey, you're not going to pick on me, is he'd go knock out the bully. And really, the way I wrote it in the book is the bully is symbolic of your fear. Now, it's not always about reaching back with a fist and knocking the bully out. Sometimes, like when you do have stress and anxiety, the worst thing you could do is resist and put up tension lines. The best thing you could do is actually just understand what it is and let it flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times with fear in general, we have to let things flow, but the control freak in most leaders, entrepreneurs, type A, high horsepower people is to fight and defend But oftentimes, if you let things flow, again, you won't attach to it. Doing that, you just let it go, and you realize that it's happening, but you don't necessarily have to stop it. And actually, by you not stopping it, it'll just continue along its way, along its path. And that goes for thoughts, it goes for feelings and emotions, it goes for anything. So that's what I found. We get so caught up in our own self, and sometimes we think we're on an island, you know?
Yeah, but we've also got to understand the difference between negative stress and positive stress. I mean, one of your chapters early on in the book says you've got to hate to lose more than you love to win. I mean, that is really seems to me to be really much about embracing positive stress.
Yeah, and what it is that chapter is written to say that, you know, so many people use their circumstances against them. Like, hey, I'm you know, either, you know, I've started at a deficit, or I'm not good enough, or all this. And it's like, you can use that to fuel you forward, and realize that there's been a ton of people in this world, you know, from Hollywood to music to sports to business to politics, you name it, that have come from circumstances that were subpar. And we all in life, as we go through this thing, we have circumstances that are subpar. Some people it's divorce. Some people it's a death in the family. Some people it's an illness, whatever. But we can't let that, again, own our psychology, or else. And it's hard when you're in that moment. It's hard. And I'm really big on conversing with yourself, and also coaching yourself.
Yes.
Just like, come on, I can't tell you how many times, even during a day, I tell myself, come on, let's go. And I talk to myself, and with vigor, you know, like, don't allow yourself to get down on yourself, you know?
You've got to be your own champion. And that oftentimes means confronting your ego. And, you know, people think of ego as being the part of you that says, you know, I'm the best. But actually, your ego is also the part of you that says, I'm a piece of crap and I'll never be anything. And you've got to walk with that ego side by side and go, listen, you know, let's get serious here. Let's not have this eat us alive, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that internal dialogue is vitally important for all of us.
And that's the thing in sports, you know, you get a lot of people that see certain athletes and they say, man, that guy's an egomaniac, or he's a jerk. And I said, you know, when you play a sport, that's me versus you. You know, you have a hitter going up against a pitcher that's throwing 95 or 100 that wants to get you out. How else are you supposed to sit in that box? Are you supposed to be, you know, somebody that doesn't have that self-confidence or that self-belief? And I even call it, sometimes you have to peacock. And when you don't have it, you have to talk yourself into it and almost peacock your chest to where it's, I got this.
Yeah.
It's just tools, man.
And that you know, the body, and this is one of the things that people forget, is psychology will often follow physiology. And so if you change the body, if you quote peacock, if you change the way you're standing, I mean, if you're standing right now as you're listening to this, or watching this, you know, you might have your head down, and your physiology is telling you you're not feeling so great. And
it'll match your physical.
Open your chest up and you breathe deeply and you lift your eyes to look upwards, you can't feel the same as you do when you look down. So your psychology follows your physiology. But I mean, obviously it doesn't stop there, but that's it's an important thing to know. And that's why a lot of those athletes walk around like that. And on top of that, there's a social pressure, and that's an important factor too.
Yeah.
You can't be walking around, the greatest example for me is Ronda Rousey. I mean, she walked around saying she was the best thing since sliced bread, and she kicked ass until she didn't. And then, and she got a butt kicked because she took that for granted. And that moment almost crushed her. I mean, you know, there's a lot of stories about her, but it almost crushed her because it went from peacocking. It should have been a belief, and it became a peacock, and you've got to get past that until it's so ingrained. But at the same time, what I know from working with champions too is there always has to be that part of you that goes, I'm the fastest gun in the West today.
Right.
Anytime some young punk can come along and take it away, whether that is you as the CEO, whether that is you as the superstar athlete, or whatever the title might be, there is always somebody coming up, snapping at your heels. And that means you've got to stay at the top of your game. You need to have a great coach. You need to be constantly lifted. And the minute you forget that and you start taking it for granted, you are dead in the water.
It's funny you say that, because when we would go on a winning streak, let's say we'd win a game or we'd win 3 games in a row, the clubhouse would naturally, the players would get loose. And Derek Jeter was our captain. He would literally walk around the clubhouse and say, "Stay humble, stay humble." He'd scream it, "Stay humble." And what it did was it took a room that was up here and it took it down just a little bit. Because he knew that if we were running too high, that our chances of getting our asses kicked went way up.
Yeah, it's important to celebrate your success. Right. Extremely important to train your brain to celebrate your success. But at the same time, to never take that for granted, right? And that is so important. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about you for a moment. What what were you doing before you became involved with the Yankees? That would have obviously changed the entire trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
What were you doing before that?
So interesting enough, I started with the New York Yankees when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
So I was a college student. So my journey was an interesting one in that I always wanted to be a professional player. So I played baseball. I played a year in college here in New York, and I got to a point in my professional or my college journey where I said, you know what? I had to be honest with myself. Are you good enough to play this game at the professional level? And I said, honestly, based on my personal evaluation and the evaluation of professional scouts in Major League Baseball, I wasn't. I said, but I still love the game. But what do you love most about the game? And I said, I love training for the game. I love training. I love that whole process of changing your body through your own work and discipline. And that's how I got into coaching. I said I got into coaching because I required a lot of coaching. And I had some coaches that were really terrible, and they set me back. I set myself back, but I allowed them to pull me there. And then I had some coaches that were incredible, that took the sponge, which was my talent, and they wrung it out for me. And they got those few extra drips, and they got me to believe in myself when I didn't believe in myself. So that's how I got into coaching. I relied heavily on coaching, but I started as an intern with the football team at the University of South Florida. And the story is a real simple one. I decided to go to school in Tampa, leave New York, go to Florida, enjoy the palm trees. And I started working with the football team at USF, and I knew that the Yankees had spring training just about 20 minutes away. So here it was, a February morning, and I said, I'm going to go watch the Yankees practice. This was in 2002. So I drove my beat up piece of crap college car up there. I parked a mile and a half away because I couldn't afford to pay for parking. And I walked up to the stadium, and I'm taking pictures with my flip phone through a chain link fence of players like Jeter and Rivera and all these top players, and sending it back to the New York. And literally that same day, I drove back to my internship at the college, and the head coach there calls me in his office, and he says, Dana, can I talk to you? He said, listen, I just got a call from the strength guy with the Yankees, and he wants to know if I have any guys that would want to volunteer to basically clean the weight room, hand out water, and watch the place while he's out on the field. Would you have any interest in that? And I said, as a matter of fact, I just got back from there. And it was amazing how that came together. And literally the next day I drive up, I got a parking spot right up front. Yeah, it was amazing. And I walked right in, and they threw a credential around my neck. It said C for clubhouse, F for field access. They threw me in Yankee gear. And next thing you know, that same field I took a picture of a day earlier, I was in the middle of the team stretch, all these great players. It was amazing. In my life as a 19-year-old kid, it changed like that. And then I said, you know what, man, I got an unbelievable opportunity here, and I'm going to go after it like a son of a bitch. And I'm not going to let it go. And that's what I did. And I became the director just 2 years later. And
At 21.
Yeah. Well, actually, at 23, I became the director, and then I was the assistant before that. 22, director to 23, and then before that, I was the assistant, and before that, I was an intern. So
That's amazing.
yeah, and I know you've done some stuff on imposter syndrome, and I was a complete imposter, and I tell people I'm still an imposter because I'm still trying to figure it all out.
Well, and you know, as you know from the stuff I've done on imposter syndrome, I think that it's what makes us excel.
Yeah.
It's that part of us that goes, oh my God, I could get caught out, so I better really get good.
Yep.
Whereas somebody who doesn't have imposter syndrome goes, I got this, and they'll fall on their ass. Whereas, you know, those of us who are going, you know, I could get caught any minute here. I better pull my finger out. I better really up my game. So it can actually have an enormous value.
Totally. And that was for me. That's how I started. I didn't know a whole lot, but man, I had to learn quick because I didn't want to lose the opportunity.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
So let's keep going with you for a minute. Every one of us, I don't care who we are, I don't care how motivated or inspired we might be, every one of us has days, sometimes hours, sometimes minutes, but certainly, you know, for many people, days where you wake up and you'd rather pull the blankets over your head and stuff's going on in your life that just seems too hard. So let me ask you, why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed on a morning when you feel like crap? And I don't mean just physically. I mean, maybe it's, you know, maybe your cat died, you know, I mean, it's emotionally shitty day.
Yeah. Well, you know, listen, I went through a period, you know, I'm sharing with you my sunshine and rainbow story, but, you know, while I was with the Yankees also, I was starting a training brand. We were going to create these franchise facilities, and I opened 5 of them. And it was going well. And then one started to take a dip, and it was the dominoes. They all went down. And that was a period of time for me where I had to deal. It was very emotional, and that I was losing my financial investment, and I was losing my own ego in terms of this brand I was going to build. And, you know, I was P.T. Barnum selling this thing to people.
Right.
And it ended up, you know, pissing down its own leg, and it was my fault. And that was a time that I really didn't want to get up.
Sure.
But I told myself, this is what I told myself: you got to go to the gym today. That was it. You know, I had a business that was flushing down the toilet, and I said, you got to go to the gym today, because I was very aware of depression, right? And I said to myself in life, I said, I never want to get to that point. So I knew that if I can train myself physically, I knew even for that hour, I'd feel good enough about myself to where I would keep my spirits up. And that was how I did it. Now, it was a low point, but I wasn't at a point where I was, you know, fearing for my own life, you know, but it was a point, it was a very low point. And what I feel is that when you could, in that moment, I put the attention on myself physically. But what I do every day is I said, how do I take the attention off of myself? And what I do now when I coach people, it's like I have people I have to care for today. You know, I got a guy call me today. He had a back issue. I had to get on it. I had another guy call me with a knee issue. So I have all these people that in my mind, I position it that they depend on me. They need me. And I need them.
Yes.
So I don't want that relationship to die. So I have to get up today.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's really it, man. I mean, I'm really big on relationships in life, because, you know, you can have the money, you can have the prestige, but if you're empty and you don't have your relationship gas tank is on empty, it's lonely to have all that cash in that big house and no one to hang with.
Absolutely.
So
we're getting close to the end of the show, and we want to move into the lightning round. Are you ready for some lightning questions?
I'll do my best.
Okay. What's your favorite joke?
My favorite joke? Oh my gosh. I can't tell it on here.
Okay, that's good. We're good with that.
I'll tell you later.
Sure. What makes Dana cry?
What makes me cry? Man, I would say it was when the Yankees would lose. Now, what makes me cry is I watch these chick flicks with my wife, and I'm the one with the tears.
That's fantastic. What makes you cry laughing?
What makes me cry laughing? You know what? Anytime I call some of the players that were on our team, and it's just you go back to old times and you start recounting some of our old stories. It's just stuff that you can't make up, and you can't believe it happened. So those old stories really crack me up.
Right. Real leadership requires courage. What's the most difficult leadership decision you've had to make?
To close my facilities that I was just telling you about. I had 5 of them. I had a ton of money wrapped up in it, and I knew I was never getting it back. And I knew most importantly, I wasn't getting the time back that I spent building this dream, which became a self-induced nightmare. So that was hard for me to close it. But when I did, I felt a sense of freedom. You know, it was like quitting, and I'm not a quitter, but that was like the first thing I quit. And I was like, wow, quitting is actually a viable option, and it could actually free you up. So it was a learning experience, but it was also something that was very difficult for me.
That's really interesting. That's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
What's a guilty pleasure for Dana?
Guilty pleasure? Dessert. I love dessert.
Any particular kind?
Anything chocolate, and any sort of Italian pastry.
Oh.
It's a vowel in the last name, you know. I think.
I figured that was the tie-in.
Yes.
What's something that stands out to you that you've learned lately? You know, maybe even in the last week. What's something you have learned recently, or relearned for that matter?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that I've learned recently is through my own journey is that I don't have to be everything. I don't have to be everywhere. And that I don't have to be trying all the time to create an outcome. Sometimes we have to just let things come to us and trust that what we do each day, and that is unforced, again, can become the magnet.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me because I'm a chaser. I'm a coach. I'm pushing people. I'm motivating. And I get myself, and that's my tripwire.
Yep, I get it.
So
in a parallel universe, I think I know the answer to this one, but we'll try it anyway. In a parallel universe, what's your career?
What's my career? Well, I may flip you out with this, but
good.
I would have loved to have been a musician.
Really? Okay, that's cool.
And I'll tell you why. You know, like the other night, 2 nights ago, I was at a concert, and I said, man, this one person, his name is Joe Bonamassa. I don't know if you know him.
I know Joe Bonamassa. I've seen him in concert.
Yeah, and he just goes up there. He doesn't even address the crowd for 90 minutes, and he has everybody's attention from an emotional standpoint, and they feel him. And I thought that was like, I just think that's an amazing thing. And when I get to work with musicians before they go on stage, I just think that's like, I stretch them and do all that stuff, and it's like, I wish I was up there, even just hitting the tambourine.
Triangle.
Yeah, anything, any cowbell.
Cowbell. We always need more cowbell.
Exactly.
Yeah, Bonamassa is awesome. I saw him in concert. He's fantastic. But you know he's a child prodigy. I mean, he's in his 40s now, and he's played on stage with the Rolling Stones and people like that when he was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, he's insanely talented.
Just to have mastery in something like that, I just, you know, I pick up a guitar and I can't get the notes to come. He picks it up and it's like, it would be like an artist picking up a paintbrush and paint. It's just, that is his gift. And to see somebody live that out and be so aligned, I think it's got to be so freeing in so many different ways.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So before we finish, Dana, the last question I like to ask all of my guests is, please tell our audience, give us some practical guidance. Give us something that our viewers, our listeners can go away and put into action today or within the next short period of time that they can go away and do in the context of what it is that you've been sharing.
Yeah. So I'll just say this. If you don't have a plan, you have to create a personalized like health and wellness plan for yourself. Okay. And again, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. but it's something, the plan is something that you commit to on the fronts of sleep. When am I going to sleep and when am I waking up? How do I add consistency to that? Nutrition. How am I structuring my meals so that it's what we call clean? You know, where it's clean eating. It's not saying you have to eat perfect all the time, but it's saying, hey, Monday through Friday during my work life, how do I eat clean as possible? And on the weekend, I could splurge a little bit. So that's, you know, sleep. We have our fueling. Now hydration. Can I challenge you to have half your body weight in ounces of water per day? Like I keep this giant thing on my dresser here or my desk, and I know I have to fill it up twice. There you go, to hit my target. So I got hydration, I got my sleep, I got my clean fueling, and then my training. What am I doing each day to elevate my heart rate? It could be weights, it could be cardio, conditioning, combination of both. Make it something that you love and enjoy, and do it. And just make that your Monday to Friday. Look at working your physical the same as going to work. I'm going to work my body, and then I'm going to go to work for the day. And pair it up. Take the weekends off if you want, but be diligent and be great Monday through Friday.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dana. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Listen,
you.
Before we go, please tell our audience, tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, about your new book, about all the resources that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. DanaCavalea.com. You know, I have everything there. You know, you can get on my daily blog. The book is on Amazon. And, you know, listen, if I could ever help anybody, that's all I enjoy doing. I love coaching people and helping people to get their physical being where it needs to be. And we'll let you take over with the rest, Dov.
Well, thank you, Dana. Listen, of course, we will, of course, share the links to Dana and his website and all those things. We'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes, and you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode that you've been listening to, any past episodes, by going to our Facebook page. Just look for Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips, Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. I want to thank Dana Cavalea for being with us today. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and an honor. We're grateful to have you here. And if you want to find out more about hiring me, Dov Barron, as your speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. The research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies faced exactly the same challenges as you. They're spending money, they're spending energy, time, and talent, attracting, training, and developing their talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're frustrated with investing in the training and development of your talent, only have them leave before you get your ROI, and come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a www, just matrix like the movie .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you for being a viewer listener of our show. Just go there and you'll be able to find the 5 areas of your leadership that you can show where your strengths are and how to bring those forward. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the body you have and how to take care of it so that you can be the very best, so you can be a champion in leadership. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. I am out.